I am Genevieve, 68 years old, and I once believed family meant unconditional support. When I sold my beloved home to help my daughter Lily and her husband Thomas buy their dream house, I thought I was securing our family bond. How quickly the transition happened from mom to maid still haunts me. The respect I deserved vanished until that final day when Thomas delivered his ultimatum. "Serve them or leave," he said. I chose neither. Before I share what happened next, tell me where you are watching from today. If you have ever felt undervalued by the very people who should treasure you most, please subscribe and join me on this journey. Life has a way of teaching us its most profound lessons when we least expect them. After 42 years of marriage to my wonderful husband Frank, his sudden heart attack left me a widow at 63. The pain was unbearable, but my saving grace was our only daughter, Lily. She had always been the light of our lives, brilliant and compassionate, with a smile that could brighten the darkest day. We had always been close, sharing weekend shopping trips and late-night conversations about life and dreams long after she should have been in bed. When Frank passed, Lily was my rock, calling daily and making the 3-hour drive from Boston to visit me in our small Connecticut town nearly every weekend. It was during her second year of graduate school that Lily met Thomas. She called me, bubbling with excitement about this charming law student who had swept her off her feet. Their courtship was a whirlwind of fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, and late-night study sessions that turned into something more. I was thrilled to see my daughter so happy after the grief we had both endured. When I first met Thomas at a dinner Lily arranged, I was impressed. He stood tall at 6 feet 2 inches, with perfectly styled dark hair and a confident smile. His handshake was firm, and he maintained steady eye contact as he complimented my apple pie and asked thoughtful questions about my life with Frank. He seemed ambitious but kind, exactly what I would have chosen for my daughter if the choice had been mine to make. 8 months later, Thomas proposed with a diamond ring that must have cost 3 months of his salary. Lily called me, crying with happiness, and I joined her tears from the other end of the line. The wedding planning consumed the next year of our lives. Thomas had very specific ideas about everything from the venue to the table settings. Some might have called it controlling, but I saw it as attention to detail, a quality that would serve him well in his legal career. Their wedding was more lavish than anything our family had ever experienced. I withdrew $20,000 from my retirement fund to help cover the costs, wanting Lily to have the day of her dreams. Seeing her float down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my first car filled me with bittersweet joy. Frank would have been so proud. After a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, the newlyweds returned to reality and the challenge of finding a home in Boston's expensive housing market. Thomas had secured a position at a prestigious law firm, and Lily was finishing her PhD in psychology. But even with their promising futures, the down payment on the kind of home Thomas envisioned seemed out of reach. During one Sunday dinner at my house, as I served the roast chicken Frank had always loved, Thomas mentioned a beautiful colonial-style home they had toured. 4 bedrooms, a spacious yard, good school district for their future children. I could see the longing in Lily's eyes as she described the kitchen with its large island and the window seat in what would be their bedroom. That night after they left, I sat in Frank's old armchair and had one of many imaginary conversations with him. Our house, the one we had lovingly maintained for 30 years, suddenly felt too big, too full of ghosts. The neighborhood had changed, with most of my friends having moved to be closer to their own children or into retirement communities. What was keeping me here, really? The decision came to me with surprising clarity. 2 weeks later, I invited Lily and Thomas to dinner again and made my proposal. I would sell my house and contribute the proceeds toward their dream home, on one condition. The new house would include a private suite for me, allowing us to live together while maintaining our independence. I would help with their future children, and they would have built-in childcare and support. Thomas calculated the numbers right there at my dining room table. With my contribution, which would amount to approximately 55% of the purchase price, they could afford the colonial and still have money left for renovations. The look of stunned gratitude on Lily's face was worth every penny. The next months passed in a blur of real estate transactions, packing, and planning. My house sold quickly to a young family, which felt right. I carefully chose which pieces of furniture to bring, what to give away, what to store. Each item carried memories, but I reminded myself I was not losing my past, just making room for a new future. Moving day arrived in early October. The colonial looked even more beautiful than in the photos, with mature maple trees turning golden in the front yard. My suite was at the back of the house on the main floor, a spacious bedroom with an attached sitting area and a small but elegant bathroom. Large windows overlooked what would become a garden in spring. Thomas had even suggested converting part of the attached garage into a craft room for my quilting. Those first few weeks felt like a dream. We shared meals at the large kitchen island, took evening walks around the neighborhood, and spent weekends exploring nearby shops and restaurants. Lily and I would have coffee together each morning before she left for her internship, just like when she was growing up. Thomas would join us on weekends, charming us with stories from his cases, careful to maintain client confidentiality while painting vivid pictures of the legal world. For the first time since losing Frank, I felt truly hopeful about the future. We were building something beautiful together, a modern, multi-generational home where we could all thrive. I began to believe that this arrangement was not just practical but perhaps even better than living alone with my memories. The sound of young voices would fill these walls soon, I thought. This old heart had room for new love. The first change came with the announcement that Lily was pregnant, just 4 months after we moved in together. The joy that filled the house was immeasurable, especially when the first ultrasound revealed not one but 2 tiny heartbeats. Twins! Frank had been a twin, though his brother had died in childhood. It felt like a beautiful connection to the past, a genetic gift from my husband reaching through time. Thomas immediately began planning the nursery conversion, ordering premium cribs, and researching the safest car seats. His attention to detail, which had seemed charming during wedding planning, now took on an almost obsessive quality. The nursery walls were painted 3 different shades of green before he was satisfied. Lily, battling morning sickness that lasted all day, deferred to his decisions with a tired smile. The pregnancy was difficult. Lily developed gestational diabetes and was put on bed rest for the final 2 months. I stepped in without hesitation, cooking healthy meals according to the nutritionist's guidelines, driving Lily to her frequent doctor appointments, and keeping the house running, while Thomas worked increasingly long hours at the firm. He was under pressure, I reasoned, a junior associate trying to impress the partners while preparing for 2 babies instead of 1. When he came home after 10 hours at the office and commented that the living room looked cluttered, or that the chicken was a bit dry, I brushed it off as stress. Jessica and Jason arrived on a snowy February morning, tiny but healthy at 5 pounds each. The first weeks were a sleepless blur of feedings, diaper changes, and doctor's appointments. I took the night shift whenever possible, wanting Lily to heal from her C-section. Thomas helped when he could, but the firm was less understanding about paternity leave than they had indicated. He was back at his desk after just 1 week, leaving early and returning late. By the time the twins were 3 months old, we had settled into a routine. Lily had decided to extend her maternity leave to a full year, not wanting to miss these precious early months. I happily served as an extra pair of hands, knowing how overwhelming twins could be. When Thomas complained about baby items taking over the living room, I created a storage system. When he mentioned the noise disturbing his sleep, I moved the midnight feedings to my suite. It was around this time that I first noticed Thomas referring to me differently when speaking to others. During a call with a colleague that he took in the kitchen, I overheard him say, "The help we have with the twins is fantastic. My mother-in-law lives with us." At the time, I thought nothing of it. Help was what I provided, after all. When the twins were 6 months old, Thomas received his first major promotion. We celebrated with champagne after the babies were asleep, and he spoke excitedly about the increased responsibility and, of course, the higher salary. That same night, he mentioned that now that they were more financially secure, perhaps they should look into hiring a professional housekeeper for the deep cleaning. I felt a sting of something I could not immediately identify. Had the house not been clean enough? I spent hours each week maintaining the space, in addition to helping with the twins. When I mentioned this to Lily the next day, she quickly reassured me that Thomas just wanted to make things easier for everyone, It was a thoughtful gesture, not a criticism. The housekeeper, Maria, started coming twice a week. I made a point of tidying before her arrival, not wanting to create unnecessary work for her. Thomas seemed annoyed by this, telling me that we were paying her to clean, and I should leave things for her to do. The word struck me as odd, considering whose money had largely purchased the house, but I let it go. Family dinners became less frequent as the twins grew, and Thomas worked later. When we did eat together, he would often check his phone or bring up work concerns. His comments about my cooking became more pointed. "Too simple," he would say. Or, "Not enough protein." Or, "This is fine for comfort food, but we should expose the twins to more sophisticated flavors." Lily, I noticed, had started to mirror his preferences and criticisms. The daughter who had once requested my chicken and dumplings as her birthday meal for 15 years straight now suggested we try more international cuisine, implied my recipes were outdated, basic Americana rather than the global palate she wanted for her children. The first major conflict occurred when the twins were approaching their first birthday. I returned from a doctor's appointment to find that Thomas had rearranged my sitting area, moving my reading chair and replacing it with a small desk. When I asked about it, he explained that they needed a space to pay bills and do household management, and since I rarely used the sitting area during the day, it made logical sense. I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. This was my space, the one area of the house that was supposed to be mine alone. I had not been consulted or even warned about the change. When I expressed this to Thomas, he seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. "I thought you would appreciate being more involved in the household management," he said. "Plus, the natural light is better here for desk work." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was their house too. We would need to find compromises. After a tense discussion, we agreed that the desk could stay, but my reading chair would return to its original position. It was a small victory that somehow felt like a larger defeat. That night, I heard Lily and Thomas arguing in their bedroom. Though I could not make out the words, the tone was clear. Tension had entered our once harmonious home, and I feared I was the cause. Was I being too sensitive? Too territorial? I lay awake wondering if I had made a mistake in suggesting this living arrangement. The twins' first birthday party became another source of tension. I had envisioned a small, sweet celebration with a few close friends and simple decorations. Thomas had other ideas. He hired an event planner, ordered custom cakes, and invited what seemed like half of Boston, including senior partners from his firm and their families. The backyard was transformed with a tent, catering stations, and professional photographers. During the party, I overheard one of Thomas' colleagues ask who I was. His response made my heart sink. "That's Lily's mother. She's living with us and helps with the twins." Almost like a built-in nanny, which is incredible in this childcare market. I smiled and nodded, playing the role that was apparently expected of me, while inside something crumbled a little further. Later, when I was bringing out the twins' birthday cakes, another guest assumed I was part of the catering staff and handed me an empty glass. I took it without comment. That night, after the guests had left and the professional cleaners had restored the house to Thomas standards, I tried to talk to Lily about how I was feeling. She was exhausted from the event and distracted by the twins, who were overtired and fussy. "Mom, can we talk about this another time? Thomas put a lot of effort into making today special, and it was amazing. I know it's not what you would have done, but times change. First birthdays are a big deal now. Times change." The phrase echoed in my mind as I helped clean sticky icing from the twins' tiny fingers. Yes, times change. And perhaps roles change too. I was beginning to understand that my place in this household was shifting in ways I had not anticipated. The transformation of my role in the household accelerated after Thomas received a second promotion, becoming the youngest senior associate in his firm's history. He celebrated by trading in his already luxury car for an even more expensive model and hiring a landscape designer to renovate the backyard with a focus on adult entertaining rather than the child-friendly space Lily had initially wanted. I noticed that Thomas no longer asked for my help, but assigned me tasks. "Please make sure the dry cleaning is picked up by 3, Genevieve." The twins need to be at their playgroup by 9:30 sharp tomorrow, Genevieve. Could you prepare something simple for dinner? The Andersons are coming over, but we'll handle the main course when we get home, Genevieve. Each request was reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern that made me feel less like family and more like staff. When his college friends visited for a weekend, one of them handed me his empty beer bottle without even looking at me, assuming I was there to clean up after them. Thomas said nothing to correct this impression. Lily was increasingly absent, both physically and emotionally. She had returned to work part-time, committing to finishing her dissertation while also seeing a few therapy clients. When home, she was often distracted, deferring to Thomas on most household decisions. The confident, independent daughter I had raised seemed to be fading, replaced by someone who constantly sought her husband's approval. My 67th birthday passed without acknowledgement. I did not mention it, curious to see if they would remember. The day came and went like any other. That evening, I called my old friend Martha from Connecticut and allowed myself a good cry after we hung up. Martha suggested I should move back, perhaps find a small apartment near her. The thought was tempting but felt like admitting defeat. The next blow came when Thomas announced that he would be converting part of the garage, the area that had been promised as my craft space, into a home gym. The equipment had already been ordered. When I reminded him of the original plan, he looked genuinely confused. "But you haven't done any quilting since you moved in," he pointed out. "The space is being wasted. This way, we can all benefit from it. You could use the equipment too, Genevieve. Exercise is important at your age." I had not quilted because I had been too busy helping with the twins and the household, but this point seemed futile to make. Instead, I asked where I should store my quilting supplies, currently in boxes in that part of the garage. "Maybe we could donate them?" Thomas suggested. "I'm sure some senior center would appreciate them. Or we could put them in storage if you're not ready to let them go." Not ready to let them go. As if my lifelong hobby, the quilts that had won ribbons at county fairs, that had marked births and weddings and graduations, were just another burden to be discarded. I said nothing. But that night I moved my sewing machine and a small box of essential supplies into my sitting area, tucking them discreetly into the closet. My social circle had shrunk considerably since moving. My friends from Connecticut rarely visited, finding the drive too long for day trips. I had made a few acquaintances in the neighborhood, mostly other grandparents I met at the park with the twins, but Thomas seemed unenthusiastic about having them over. "The house needs to be presentable," he would say. "Maybe another time." One evening, as I was bathing the twins, I overheard Thomas on the phone in the hallway. "It's challenging sometimes," he was saying. "Supporting a mother-in-law wasn't exactly in the 5-year plan, but what can you do? Lily would never consider asking her to leave." I sat back on my heels next to the bathtub, the cheerful splash of toddlers suddenly distant in my ears. Supporting me? I had contributed over $500,000 to the purchase of this home. I cooked, cleaned, provided 30 hours or more of childcare each week. If anything, I was supporting them. For the first time, I wondered if Thomas had simply viewed my financial contribution as his due somehow, rather than the generous gift it was. Had he conveniently forgotten where the money for our home had come from? Or had he perhaps rewritten the narrative in his mind, casting himself as the magnanimous provider and me as a dependent? The final straw in this phase of our deteriorating relationship came when Thomas created a household duty roster, neatly printed and laminated, hanging on the refrigerator door. My name appeared next to most of the daily tasks. Breakfast preparation, school drop-off, grocery shopping, laundry, dinner preparation 4 nights a week. Lily was assigned weekend meals and bedtime routines. Thomas was responsible for taking out the garbage and managing household finances. When I pointed out the imbalance, Thomas had a ready explanation. "You're home all day," he said. "Lily and I both work. It's only fair that you handle more of the household duties. We all need to contribute according to our abilities and availability." I thought of pointing out that caring for 3-year-old twins was itself more than a full-time job, that I was not the house manager but a grandmother who had expected to help, not serve. But the words died in my throat when I saw Lily nodding in agreement with her husband. I began to feel invisible in my own home, or rather, In what I had thought was partly my home, decisions were made without my input. Dinner conversations excluded me. Even the twins, now talking in full sentences, had picked up on the household hierarchy. "Grandma," Jason said one day, "Daddy says you work for us. Is that true?" Out of the mouths of babes comes the unvarnished truth. I assured him that I was family, not an employee, but the question lingered in my mind. What exactly was my position here? And more importantly, what had I allowed it to become? The situation that finally forced me to confront the reality of my position came when Thomas' parents announced they would be visiting from California. They had not attended the wedding due to his father's health issues, and had only met the twins once, briefly, when they were infants. This week-long visit was a big deal, and preparations began well in advance. Thomas hired professional cleaners for a deep clean of the house. Lily took time off work. New guest towels were purchased, the guest room redecorated. I offered to help prepare some special meals, knowing from Lily that his mother was a fantastic cook who prided herself on her dinner parties. Thomas gave me a tight smile. "That won't be necessary, Genevieve. My mother has very specific tastes. We'll handle the meal planning. But we will need your help with the twins, and keeping things running smoothly during their stay." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. Perhaps this was for the best. I would focus on the twins, and stay out of the way otherwise. The day of their arrival, Thomas instructed me to make myself scarce during the initial reunion. "I think it would be best if they had some private family time first," he explained. "You can meet them at dinner." Family time. The words stung more than they should have. I was family too, wasn't I? But I retreated to my suite, taking the twins with me to play quietly until summoned. When I was finally called to join them, Thomas made the introductions. "And this is Genevieve, Lily's mother. She's our live-in help with the kids." His mother, a slim, elegant woman with perfectly highlighted hair, extended her hand. "So you're the nanny. How wonderful that Lily found someone she trusts so completely." "I'm not the nanny," I started to explain. "I'm Lily's mother. I live here and help with the twins because—" Thomas smoothly interrupted. "Genevieve sold her house and helped us purchase this one. It's a arrangement that works for everyone. The twins adore their grandmother." His father nodded approvingly. "Smart financial decision. Property values in this area just keep climbing. Good investment on your part." There it was. My contribution reduced to a financial transaction, my role to that of a convenient childcare provider. I caught Lily's eye, hoping for some correction or support, but she was busy arranging appetizer plates, avoiding my gaze. The real shock came at dinner that evening. Thomas had ordered catering from an upscale restaurant, and as everyone took their seats, he turned to me. "Genevieve, would you mind serving tonight? And maybe eating in the kitchen? We're a bit crowded at the table with the high chairs for the twins." The table easily seated 8. There was plenty of room. But Thomas was looking at me with an expression that brooked no argument, and his parents were watching the exchange with mild curiosity, as one might observe a minor negotiation with household staff. I served the meal, moving quietly around the table, filling water glasses, and bringing out each course as instructed. Through the kitchen door, I could hear the conversation flowing, stories about Thomas' childhood, discussion of his recent promotion, plans for the twins' education. Not once did anyone seem to notice my absence. As I sat alone at the kitchen island, eating the same gourmet meal but somehow finding it tasteless, tears slid down my cheeks. I thought of Frank, of how appalled he would have been at this treatment of his beloved wife. I thought of the home we had built together, the one I had sold to help create this new family space that had no real place for me. Later that night, after his parents had retired to the guest room, I caught Lily alone in the kitchen. I needed to know if she had even noticed what had happened, if she understood how deeply I had been hurt. "Honey," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened at dinner tonight?" Lily looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes pronounced in the dim light. "Mom, please don't make a scene. His parents are very traditional. They have expectations about how a household should be run." "Traditional?" I repeated. "So traditionally, grandmothers eat alone in the kitchen while serving dinner to the rest of the family?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's just for a week. Thomas is under so much pressure to impress them. His father is still disappointed he didn't join the family business back in California. He needs everything to be perfect. And perfect means treating me like the help? I asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts. Lily finally looked at me directly, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes, too. It's not just you, Mom. Do you think this is the life I imagined? Thomas has changed since the promotions. Everything has to be his way. The twins can't even make normal kid messes. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. I reached for her hand across the counter. Then we should talk about it. Together, we can. The kitchen door swung open, and Thomas stood there, his expression cold. I overheard what you're saying to my wife, he said. If you're unhappy with the arrangements here, Genevieve, we can certainly discuss alternatives. His tone made it clear what those alternatives might be. Lily immediately straightened, wiping away her tears. Thomas, Mom was just tired. We're all tired. It's been a long day. No, he replied, entering the kitchen fully now. Let's be honest here. Genevieve, you are essentially an employee in this household. You live here rent-free, eat food we provide, and in exchange, you help with the children and the house. If those terms don't suit you anymore, you're free to leave. The words hit me like physical blows. Employee, rent-free, terms. This was how he saw me, how he had perhaps always seen me. Not as family, not as a partner in creating this home, but as hired help who should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. I'm not an employee, I said, finding my voice despite the shock. I contributed more than half the purchase price of this house. This is my home too. Thomas laughed, a short, dismissive sound. That was a gift, as I understand it, not an investment with expected returns. You're here because we allow it, and frankly, your attitude lately has been making everyone uncomfortable. My parents noticed it too. From upstairs came the sound of crying. The twins had woken up, probably from hearing the raised voices. Lily immediately moved toward the stairs, but Thomas put a hand on her arm. Let Genevieve handle it, he said. That's her job, isn't it? In that moment, looking at his cold eyes and the way my daughter seemed to shrink beside him, something crystallized in my mind. This was not a temporary misunderstanding or a bad day. This was the reality of what my life had become, and what it would continue to be if nothing changed. Fine, I said, moving toward the stairs. I'll see to the children. As I passed them, Thomas delivered the final blow. We're paying you in room and board to be the help, Genevieve. Either serve the family without complaint or leave. Those are your options. The twins were sitting up in their beds, little faces wet with tears. I gathered them in my arms, rocking them gently, reassuring them that everything was fine, just grown-up talk. As they settled back to sleep, I looked around the cheerful room we'd painted together when they were still in Lily's belly, at the quilted wall hanging I had made featuring their names and birth date, at the rocking chair where I had spent countless hours singing them to sleep. Serve without complaint or leave. As if those were the only options. As I returned to my suite, closing the door softly behind me, I knew there had to be a third way forward. I just had to find it. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying years of small humiliations, of boundaries crossed, of my role diminishing from mother and grandmother to servant. How had I allowed this to happen? What would Frank have advised me to do? Around 3 a.m, I remembered something. Rising quietly, I went to my closet and pulled out the fireproof document box I had brought from my old home. Inside, among birth certificates and insurance policies, was the deed to this house and the records of the purchase transaction. I spread them on my bed, reading by the light of my phone. There it was in black and white. My contribution had not been a gift but an investment in joint property. I owned 55% of this house, a fact that Thomas seemed to have conveniently forgotten or deliberately misrepresented. The revelation should have made me angry, but instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For too long, I had been accommodating, making excuses, trying to keep the peace. I had allowed my own sense of worth to be eroded by 1,000 small cuts, no more. As dawn broke, I knew with absolute certainty what I needed to do. It would be painful, it would cause conflict, and it might forever change my relationship with my daughter. But continuing as things were was no longer an option I could live with. The woman who had raised Lily, who had built a life with Frank, who had faced widowhood with courage, was still inside me. She deserved better than to be treated as a servant in a home she had helped create. And perhaps, just perhaps, taking a stand might ultimately be the best thing for Lily too, who seemed to be disappearing into the shadow of her husband's demands. With that resolution firm in my mind, I finally drifted to sleep as the first birds began their morning songs outside my window. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but it would also bring the first steps toward reclaiming my dignity and my life. The morning after Thomas' ultimatum, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While the household bustled with breakfast preparations for his parents, I made my first move. I texted my old friend Martha back in Connecticut, asking if her offer of temporary housing was still available. Her response came within minutes. "My guest house is yours for as long as you need. Just say when." That small act of reaching out gave me courage for what came next. When everyone had left for the day, Thomas and Lily to work, his parents taking the twins to a nearby children's museum, I called the law firm where Frank and I had created our wills years ago. Our attorney had retired, but his daughter had taken over the practice. I explained my situation and asked for an urgent appointment. Jessica Mitchell, Esquire, was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened without interruption as I explained the living arrangement, my financial contribution, and the deteriorating treatment. When I finished, she nodded and pulled out a legal pad. "What exactly do you want to accomplish here, Mrs. Anderson?" she asked. "I want what is fair," I replied. "I own more than half of a home where I am being treated as an unwelcome guest at best and an unpaid servant at worst. I need to know my options." For the next hour, we discussed those options in detail. Jessica explained that my contribution to the house purchase, without proper legal documentation specifying it as a gift, constituted a significant ownership stake. She advised me to gather evidence of the original transaction, any communications about the intent of the arrangement, and documentation of my ongoing contributions to the household. "Do you want to continue living there under different terms?" she asked. "Or are you looking to recover your investment and move on?" The question gave me pause. Did I want to stay? Could this situation be salvaged? I thought of the twins, of how much I would miss their daily presence in my life. But I also thought of the constant belittlement, the erosion of my self-respect, the way even Lily seemed to have accepted my diminished status. "I want out," I said finally. "But I want what is rightfully mine, and I want to ensure that the twins will still be part of my life." Jessica nodded and outlined our next steps. We would prepare a formal letter establishing my ownership stake and proposing a buyout arrangement. She would also draft visitation terms for the twins, though she cautioned that these would be harder to enforce legally as grandparent rights varied by state. As I left her office, I felt a mixture of trepidation and relief. The path forward was clear, but it would not be easy. I spent the afternoon at a cafe, making lists and plans, not wanting to return to the house until I had to. My next call was to my bank, where I arranged to open a new account at a different institution. For too long, I had allowed Thomas to manage the household finances, including my own Social Security and pension deposits. That ended today. Back at the house, I waited until after dinner, when the twins were in bed and Thomas' parents had retired for the evening. I asked Lily and Thomas for a private conversation in the living room. Thomas' initial reaction was irritation at the interruption of his evening routine, but something in my demeanor must have signaled that this was not a request to be dismissed. "I want to discuss my position in this household and the ownership of this home," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. Thomas sighed dramatically. "Genevieve, if this is about dinner last night, I think you're overreacting. My parents are old-fashioned, and sometimes compromises—" "This is not about dinner," I interrupted, surprising all of us with my firmness. "This is about the fact that I own 55% of this house, a fact that seems to have been forgotten." I placed the deed and financial records on the coffee table between us. Lily's eyes widened as she looked at the documents. Thomas leaned forward, his expression shifting from dismissive to concerned. "That was a gift toward the purchase," he said, Though with less confidence than before, we never discussed it as an ownership stake. We absolutely did, I countered. I never would have contributed over $500,000 without an ownership interest, and nothing in any of our communications indicates it was a gift. I have emails confirming our agreement that I would live here as part owner, not as a guest or employee. Thomas glanced at Lily, who was staring at the documents with a troubled expression. Mom, we always appreciated your contribution, she said softly. But we did think of it as helping us buy our family home. The wording was telling. Our family home. Not your family home, which would have included me. I own this house with you, I stated clearly. My attorney has confirmed this. I have been patient, accommodating, and helpful, beyond any reasonable expectation. In return, I have been gradually relegated to the role of unpaid household staff. That ends now. Thomas' face had darkened. You're threatening us? After everything we've done for you? The audacity of his statement nearly took my breath away. Everything they've done for me? I had provided free childcare worth thousands of dollars monthly, cooking, cleaning, and emotional support, all while being increasingly disrespected in my own home. I'm not threatening anyone, I replied. I'm stating facts and preparing to make changes. I have 2 proposals for you to consider. I outlined the options my attorney and I had discussed. Either they could begin treating me as a co-owner of the home and family member deserving of respect, with concrete changes to household responsibilities and decision-making, or they could buy out my share of the property at current market value, which would require them to obtain additional financing. As I spoke, I watched their faces. Lily looked stunned and conflicted. Thomas' expression shifted from anger to calculation as he processed the financial implications. This is ridiculous, he said when I finished. You can't just change the terms of our arrangement because your feelings are hurt. We have a verbal agreement. Which I have documented, I said, indicating the emails and texts I had printed out, and which in no way included me being treated as a servant or excluded from family activities. The conversation continued for over an hour, cycling through Thomas' denial, attempts at manipulation, and finally grudging recognition that I was serious and prepared. Lily spoke little, caught between her husband and her mother, her distress evident in her reddened eyes and trembling hands. I need time to think, she said finally. This is all so sudden. It wasn't sudden for me, I told her gently. It's been building for years. I just finally reached my breaking point. As we prepared to end this initial discussion, I shared my final decision. I would be staying with Martha for a while, giving everyone space to consider the options. I had already packed a small suitcase with essentials. I would return in 2 weeks with my attorney to continue the negotiations. Thomas immediately objected, citing the twins and the help they needed with them. His parents were only visiting for a few more days, and then Lily would be overwhelmed without my assistance. You should have thought of that before clarifying my position as an employee rather than family, I replied. Employees can quit when they're mistreated. Family members deserve better. That night, as I finished packing the items I would need immediately, I wrote 2 letters. One for each of the twins, expressing my love for them and promising that no matter what happened between the adults, I would always be their grandmother. I sealed these in envelopes to be given to them when they were older. The second letter was for Lily alone. In it, I poured out my heart not just about the current situation, but about what I had observed of her marriage, of how her own light seemed dimmed, her voice silenced. I reminded her of the strong, independent woman she had been, the one who had specific dreams and opinions. I expressed my fear that in trying to accommodate Thomas' increasingly controlling behavior, she was losing herself. I closed by assuring her of my unconditional love, regardless of what decisions she made going forward. Before dawn the next morning, I called a car service. As I waited in the driveway with my suitcase, I looked back at the beautiful colonial that had been meant to be our shared family home. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness for what might have been. The sound of small feet on the stairs made me turn. Jason stood in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, looking confused. "Grandma going bye-bye?" he asked, his lower lip trembling. I knelt down and opened my arms. He ran into them, his small body warm against mine. "Just for a little while, sweetheart," I whispered. Grandma will see you again soon, I promise. As my car pulled away, I saw Lily standing at the upstairs window, watching me leave. Whether with relief or regret, I couldn't tell. But the road ahead, uncertain as it was, stretched toward a future where I would reclaim my dignity, whatever that might cost. 2 weeks passed in the peaceful quiet of Martha's guest house. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without a list of tasks assigned by someone else. I took long walks by the Connecticut shore, reconnected with old friends over unhurried lunches, and slowly felt myself emerging from the fog of my diminished existence. My attorney had been in contact with Thomas and Lily, establishing a formal negotiation process. Thomas had initially blustered and threatened, but when faced with the legal documentation of my ownership stake, he had been forced to acknowledge the reality of the situation. The property would either need to be sold, with proceeds divided according to ownership percentages, or they would need to buy me out, which would require significant additional financing on their part. I missed the twins desperately. Lily sent occasional photos and allowed a few video calls, though Thomas could be heard in the background, his tone clipped and controlling. The twins asked repeatedly when I was coming home, questions that Lily deflected with vague references to Grandma taking a vacation. At the end of the 2 weeks, I returned to Boston for a Sunday dinner, a neutral opportunity to see how things stood before the formal meeting with attorneys scheduled for the following day. I arrived bearing gifts for the twins and a homemade apple pie, Lily's childhood favorite. Thomas opened the door, his smile tight but present, the gracious host once more, though we both knew it was performance rather than genuine welcome. The twins burst past him, throwing themselves into my arms with excited squeals. Their unbridled joy brought tears to my eyes. This was what I stood to lose in my stand for dignity, their daily presence in my life. Dinner was a strained affair. Thomas' parents had returned to California, and the 4 adults at the table maintained a veneer of polite conversation centered mainly on the twins' activities and achievements. After the meal, Thomas suggested that Lily give the twins their bath, while he and I had a private conversation. My daughter's quick, concerned glance between us spoke volumes, but she nodded and ushered the children upstairs. When we were alone, Thomas' demeanor changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Let's cut to the chase, Genevieve," he said. "You've made your point and leveraged your position effectively. I'll give you that. But this little power play of yours has consequences you may not have considered." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He took a sip of his wine before speaking again. "Firstly, forcing us to buy you out or sell the house will create financial hardship. That affects Lily and the twins, not just me. Are you prepared to do that to your daughter and grandchildren?" I had anticipated this line of attack. "My contribution gave you a home you otherwise could not have afforded," I replied calmly. "The hardship, if any, comes from your misrepresentation of our arrangement and your treatment of me, not from my seeking what is legally mine." His jaw tightened. "Secondly, this adversarial approach will inevitably affect your relationship with the twins. Lily and I will determine how much access you have to them. Courts rarely intervene in favor of grandparents unless there are exceptional circumstances." The threat was clear, and it struck at my greatest fear. But I had prepared for this too. I would hate for the twins to grow up learning that it's acceptable to treat family members as servants, or that financial bullying is an appropriate way to resolve conflicts, I said. "What example are we setting for them, Thomas?" For a moment, genuine anger flashed across his face, cracking the controlled facade. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You think you have the upper hand here, but you don't. I'll fight this every step of the way. I'll make it so expensive and drawn out that whatever you get won't be worth what it cost you." I met his gaze steadily. "I have time," I said. "I have resources, and I have right on my side. Do you really want to spend the next year or more in legal battles that will drain your finances and expose your behavior to colleagues, friends, and family?" The standoff might have continued, but we were interrupted by the sound of the twins calling for their father to come read their bedtime story. Thomas stood, straightening his shirt as if shaking off our conversation physically. "Think about what I said," he told me. "There are better solutions than legal warfare, solutions that would allow you to remain in the twins' lives while saving face." I watched him climb the stairs, his confident stride at odds with the desperation I had glimpsed beneath his threats. He was worried, and he should be. The control he had so carefully constructed was slipping. Lily found me later in the kitchen, washing dishes I no longer had any obligation to clean, an old habit proving hard to break. She looked tired, the circles under her eyes more pronounced than 2 weeks ago. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk? Just us?" We settled in the living room, the space between us on the sofa, a physical manifestation of the distance that had grown between us. For several moments, neither of us spoke. "Are you really going to force us to sell the house?" she finally asked. "The twins are settled here. They have friends in the neighborhood. They love their preschool." "I am not forcing anything," I replied. "I am asking for my rightful share of a property I helped purchase. What happens next is up to you and Thomas." She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "Thomas says we can't afford to buy you out. The payments would be too high with current interest rates, and selling means losing everything we've built here. Including your convenient live and help," I added quietly. Lily flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Is that what you think? That we just wanted you for free childcare?" "What else should I think?" I asked. "When was the last time you stood up for me when Thomas was dismissive or disrespectful? When did you last correct him when he referred to me as the help or assigned me household tasks without discussion?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It's complicated, Mom. Thomas has been under so much pressure at work, and his parents have these expectations." "Stop making excuses for him," I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. "Look at yourself, Lily. Where is the confident, independent woman who had such clear boundaries and goals? You defer to him on everything. You accept his treatment of me, of you, of the children. This isn't the life you wanted. You don't understand what marriage is like," she shot back. "Compromises have to be made. Not everything can be perfect all the time. I lived with your father for 42 years, I reminded her. We disagreed, we compromised, we supported each other. But we never diminished each other, never treated each other as less than equal partners. What you're describing isn't compromise, it's surrender." The truth of my words hung in the air between us. Lily's defenses crumbled, and her tears flowed freely now. I moved closer, taking her hand in mine. "I love you," I said gently. "I always will, no matter what. But I can't continue to live in a home where I am not respected, and I worry about what you and the twins are learning from this dynamic." Our conversation continued late into the night, deeper and more honest than we had been with each other in years. Lily confessed her own unhappiness, her awareness of how Thomas had changed, or perhaps revealed his true nature, over time. She spoke of financial concerns, of how their lifestyle had expanded to match his rising income, leaving them with little savings despite his impressive salary. As we parted for the night, me to the guest room and Lily to the master suite she shared with Thomas, she hugged me tightly. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," she whispered, "but I don't know how to fix this." Sleep that night was fitful, filled with dreams of the past and anxiety about the coming day. The meeting with attorneys was scheduled for 10 the next morning. Would it be the final break, or was there still hope for reconciliation on new, more equitable terms? I rose early, packing my small overnight bag and preparing to leave regardless of the outcome. As I entered the kitchen for coffee, I found Thomas already there, dressed in a crisp suit despite it being his day off. His laptop was open, spreadsheets displayed on the screen. "I've been running the numbers all night," he said without preamble. "We can't afford to buy you out, not without selling the house. But I have a counter-proposal." He slid a document across the island toward me. It outlined a new arrangement. I would retain my ownership stake, but receive rental payments for my portion of the house. I could live elsewhere but would have guaranteed visitation with the twins. In essence, I would become their landlord rather than a co-owner occupant. It was a clever solution, one that would allow them to stay in the house while acknowledging my financial stake. But it didn't address the underlying issues of respect and family dynamics. "And if I were to accept this, what about my relationship with the family?" I asked. "Would I be welcomed back as a grandmother and mother, not as a convenient source of childcare and household management?" Thomas hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional aspects of the negotiation. "Boundaries would need to be established," he said carefully. Clear expectations on both sides. His corporate terminology for what should have been a loving family relationship told me everything I needed to know. He still saw this as a transaction, not a healing. The twins came bounding into the kitchen then, excited to find both their father and grandmother there. They climbed onto stools, asking for breakfast and attention. As I prepared their favorite oatmeal with cinnamon and apple slices, an activity that had once been my daily joy, I felt a profound sadness wash over me. This ordinary moment of family life was what I stood to lose. Lily joined us, her expression wary as she observed the document on the counter and Thomas' tense posture. "Good morning," she said, meeting my eyes with a question in hers. I gave a small shrug in response, neither confirming nor denying progress. As we sat eating together, a family tableau that belied the fractures beneath the surface, Thomas' phone rang. He answered with his professional voice, then frowned, listening intently. When he hung up, he looked shaken. "That was Johnson from the firm," he said to Lily. "The Henderson case has blown up. They need me to come in immediately." "On a Sunday?" Lily asked, surprised. Thomas was already standing, gathering his laptop and papers, including the proposal Head offered me. "It's an emergency situation. Potentially millions at stake. I have to go." "But our meeting with the attorneys," Lily protested. "It's in 2 hours." "You'll have to handle it," he replied, already moving toward the door. "Tell them need to reschedule. Family emergency." And with that, he was gone, the front door closing firmly behind him. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the twins oblivious to the tension as they continued eating their breakfast. "He ran away," Lily said finally, a note of wonder in her voice. "When faced with actually having to resolve this, he literally ran away." I saw something shift in my daughter's expression, a clarity I hadn't seen in years. She straightened in her chair, suddenly looking more like the confident young woman I remembered. "Mom," she said, "let's still meet with the attorneys today, but I want to discuss a different option." Later that morning, as we sat in the conference room at my attorney's office, Lily surprised me with her proposal. She had been secretly consulting with a financial advisor of her own, concerned about Thomas' increasingly lavish spending and minimal saving. What she had learned had alarmed her. Despite his impressive income, they had little equity beyond my contribution to the house, substantial credit card debt, and virtually no retirement savings. "I want to sell the house," she stated firmly. "Mom gets her full share, based on both her initial contribution and the market's appreciation. Thomas and I will downsize to something we can actually afford. And Mom, I want you to help me find a place near you in Connecticut, with room for you if you want it." The attorney looked between us, clearly surprised by this turn of events. "Is your husband in agreement with this plan?" she asked Lily. My daughter took a deep breath. "Not yet," she admitted. "But he will be, because it's our only realistic option, and because I'm done pretending that his way is the only way." As we left the office, plans in motion for a property appraisal and market analysis, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that a resolution seemed possible, grief for the family home that would be lost, worry about the challenges ahead, but most of all, pride in my daughter who had found her voice again. Back at the house, we found Thomas had returned, his emergency apparently resolved more quickly than expected. His expression darkened when he saw us enter together, a united front he hadn't anticipated. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I told you to reschedule the meeting." "We kept the appointment," Lily replied, her voice steady. "And we've made a decision. We're selling the house." What followed was one of the most difficult afternoons of my life. Thomas cycled through disbelief, anger, attempts at manipulation, and finally desperate bargaining. Lily remained calm throughout, presenting the financial reality in terms he could not refute. I largely observed, speaking only when directly addressed, recognizing that this was primarily between husband and wife now. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the living room windows, Thomas finally seemed to accept the inevitable. The house would be sold. I would receive my share. They would need to find a more affordable living situation. "So that's it?" he asked, defeat evident in his voice. "You two have decided everything?" "This isn't what I wanted," I told him truthfully. I wanted to be part of a multi-generational family home where everyone was respected and valued. That vision died when you decided I was staff rather than family. He had no response to that, no defense against the simple truth. The silence stretched between us, filled with all that had been lost. The twins came downstairs then, having woken from their naps, bringing with them the innocent energy of children unaware of adult complexities. As they climbed onto laps and demanded attention, the tension in the room necessarily dissipated. Later, as I prepared to leave from Martha's house once more, I placed my house keys on the kitchen counter. A symbolic gesture, perhaps, but a meaningful one. I was no longer a resident here, but a co-owner moving toward divestment. Thomas watched from the doorway as I hugged the twins goodbye, promising to see them very soon. His expression was unreadable, a mix of resentment and perhaps, though I might have imagined it, a hint of respect. "You won," he said quietly, as I passed him on my way out. I paused, meeting his eyes directly. "This isn't about winning, Thomas. It's about dignity and fairness, something I hope you'll remember in your future relationships." With those words, I walked out the door and toward an uncertain but hopeful future, one where I would rebuild my life on my own terms, with my self-respect intact. The first weeks in Martha's guest house were harder than I had expected. Though the space was charming, a converted carriage house with exposed beams and morning light filtering through east-facing windows, it wasn't home. At night, I would wake disoriented, reaching for the familiar before remembering where I was and why. The absence of the twins' morning giggles created a silence that felt physical in its intensity. I questioned my decision constantly. Had I been too harsh, too unbending? Could I have found a way to maintain my dignity without fracturing the family? The doubt would creep in during quiet moments, a whispered "what if" that threatened my resolve. Martha, bless her, gave me space to grieve while ensuring I didn't isolate myself. She invited me for dinners, introduced me to her book club, and never asked more than I was ready to share. Her quiet support was a lifeline during those early days of adjustment. The first surprise came 3 weeks after our confrontation. Lily called, asking if she could visit, alone. She arrived the next day, without the twins, looking both nervous and determined. "Thomas doesn't know him here," she admitted as we settled in Martha's garden, the early summer roses just beginning to bloom. "He thinks him at a conference for work." My heart sank at the deception, a sign that their relationship remained troubled. But I listened as Lily updated me on the practical matters first. The house was being appraised. They were working with a realtor on listing strategies. Attorneys were drafting the necessary agreements for the sale and division of proceeds. Then she came to the real purpose of her visit. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I think my marriage is in trouble. Has been for a long time, actually." For the next several hours, we talked openly about the patterns in her relationship with Thomas, patterns I had observed but had been reluctant to name directly. His controlling behavior, the subtle undermining of her confidence, the isolation from friends and family, the financial dominance despite her own successful career. Classic signs I had failed to fully acknowledge, perhaps because doing so would have required earlier action on my part. "I don't know if it can be saved," Lily confessed, "or even if it should be, but I know I can't continue living this way, watching what it's doing to me and starting to see it affect the twins. Jason is becoming so anxious about making mistakes, about everything being perfect." I held my daughter's hand as she cried, as she voiced fears and doubts that had been building for years. I didn't offer solutions or ultimatums, recognizing that these decisions were hers alone to make. Instead, I assured her of my unconditional support, whatever path she chose. "It's like I've been sleepwalking," she said toward the end of our conversation. "Your leaving, as painful as it was, woke me up, made me see things I had been ignoring." As she prepared to leave, Lily surprised me with a request. "Would you be willing to have the twins for a weekend soon? I think I need some time alone to really think about what's next. And I know they miss you terribly." That first weekend with the twins was both joyful and bittersweet. Martha helped me prepare the guest house with child-friendly touches, borrowed toys, and favorite snacks. When Lily dropped them off, Thomas remained in the car, a distant figure unwilling to engage directly. Jessica and Jason explored the small carriage house with excited curiosity, delighted by the garden and Martha's elderly golden retriever, who tolerated their enthusiastic attention with patient dignity. They asked about when we'd all live together again, questions I answered with gentle honesty, appropriate to their young understanding. Sometimes families need to make changes, but the love never changes. In the weeks that followed, unexpected support emerged from a quarter I hadn't anticipated. Thomas' parents reached out, having been informed of the impending sale and separation. Rather than taking their son's side unequivocally as I had feared, they expressed concern about the situation and a desire to maintain their relationship with me as the twins' grandmother, regardless of what happened between Thomas and Lily. His mother, Patricia, called me directly, her usual formality softened by what seemed like genuine regret. "I fear we contributed to this situation," she said. "The expectations we placed on Thomas growing up, the emphasis on appearances and success above all else, we're seeing the results of that now, and not just in his marriage. The housing market in Boston proved strong, and the Colonial sold within 2 months for significantly above the purchase price from 4 years earlier. My share of the proceeds provided financial security I hadn't expected at this stage of life, funds that would allow me to establish a new home and still have resources to help others if I chose." Thomas, faced with the financial reality of the situation, became more practical in his approach. The emotional manipulation gave way to business-like negotiations. He seemed to recognize that fighting the inevitable would only deplete resources they all needed for the future. By late summer, the sale was complete. Lily had found a modest but charming apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood, much closer to her work and the twins' preschool. Thomas had moved into a sleek downtown condo, beginning the separation that would eventually lead to divorce proceedings by year's end. I used part of my proceeds to purchase a small 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet community halfway between Boston and Martha's home. Close enough to be present in the twins' lives, but with enough distance to establish my own independent life. The cottage had a lovely garden and a sunroom perfect for the quilting projects I had resumed with renewed passion. The twins spent every other weekend with me, a schedule that became the highlight of my calendar. Without the tension and walking on eggshells that had characterized our previous living arrangement, our relationship blossomed. I was able to be fully present with them, not distracted by household duties or concerns about Thomas' approval. 6 months after our departure from the Colonial, Thomas was forced to face another financial reality. The downtown condo, combined with the support payments for the twins and the high interest rates on his credit card debt, exceeded his ability to maintain the lifestyle he had established. He sold the condo and moved to a more modest apartment, a humbling adjustment for someone whose identity had been so wrapped up in appearances. Lily flourished in her newfound independence. She completed her dissertation, secured a full-time position at a respected therapy practice, and began rebuilding the friendships that had gradually fallen away during her marriage. I saw glimpses of the bright, confident daughter I had raised, emerging from years of subtle suppression. Our family celebrations took new forms. The twins' 5th birthday was held in a local park, a simple affair with homemade cupcakes and games, rather than the elaborate catered events Thomas had insisted upon. The joy on their faces as they ran with friends, free from expectations of perfect behavior, was worth more than any expensive party. The holiday season brought another milestone. For the first time, Lily, the twins, and I created our own traditions without Thomas orchestrating every detail. We baked cookies using Frank's old family recipes, decorated a slightly crooked tree the twins had insisted was perfect, and spent Christmas Eve reading stories by the fireplace in my cottage. There was a bittersweet quality to the celebration, acknowledgement of what had been lost alongside appreciation for what had been gained. As the 1-year anniversary of my departure from the Colonial approached, I reflected on the journey. The pain had been real and deep, but so too was the growth that had come from it. I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth, established healthy boundaries, and modeled for my daughter and grandchildren that respect was not negotiable, even from family, especially from family. Lily filed for divorce that spring, a decision reached after months of counseling and careful consideration. Thomas, to his credit, did not fight the inevitability of the dissolution. Perhaps he too had recognized the unhealthy patterns in their relationship, or perhaps he simply recognized the futility of further conflict. The most meaningful change came in my relationship with Lily. The mother-daughter bond that had been strained by her marriage was healing, growing stronger through our shared experiences. We talked more openly now, about everything from parenting challenges to our hopes for the future. The honesty that had been missing for years returned, creating a foundation for a healthier relationship moving forward. One warm evening in June, as Lily and I sat watching the twins play in my small garden, she asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Do you regret it, Mom? Standing up to Thomas, leaving, forcing all these changes?" I considered carefully before answering. "I regret that it became necessary," I said finally. "I regret the pain it caused everyone, especially the twins. But I don't regret refusing to accept disrespect and diminishment as the price of family connection. Some prices are too high, even for the things we value most." Lily nodded, watching her children who were helping a worm find its way back to the soil after a rainstorm. "Maybe the most important gift you gave them was showing that it's never too late to choose self-respect," she said softly. "That's a lesson I hope they'll carry forever." As twilight settled over the garden, the twins came running to show us the fairy house they'd constructed from twigs and leaves. Their faces were dirt-smudged and radiant with the simple joy of creation and discovery. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the difficult path we'd traveled had led us exactly where we needed to be. The journey from valued family member to household employee and back to respected matriarch had been painful, but necessary. I had learned that true family relationships must be built on mutual respect, that financial contributions don't create obligations to accept mistreatment, and that it's never too late to stand up for your own dignity. Most importantly, I had discovered that choosing freedom from toxic dynamics isn't selfish, it's an act of courage that can ultimately benefit everyone involved. By refusing to accept the role of unappreciated servant in my own family, I had opened the door to more authentic, healthy relationships for all of us. As we head into this new chapter of our lives, I want to ask you, my friends watching this, have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family harmony and personal dignity? How did you navigate that challenging terrain? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Remember that it's never too late to choose yourself, to demand the respect you deserve. Thank you for joining me today, and may you find the courage to walk your own path with dignity, whatever challenges you face.